I'm going to show you guys how to create this EDM pluck from scratch in Faceplant. Okay, so the first thing we're going to start out with is creating the wavetable. So I'm going to insert a MIDI track and set it to C1. Perfect. And then now I'm going to insert Faceplant. And so for this, it's just going to be a simple analog generator with an envelope output. And then for the effects, I'm just going to add a ladder filter snap in. I like the beefiness the ladder filter adds to a sound. So for this, I'm going to right click the resonance and set it to 16. And then I'm going to turn on the saturate option and then right click the drive and hit 13. And now we want to automate our cutoff of our ladder filter. So I'm going to right click that, go to assign to automation slot and click on slot 1. So that way we can automate this inside of our DAW. So now I'm just going to come down here to our Faceplant on the arrow, click on that, and then hit configure, and then click on our cutoff on our ladder filter. I'm just going to drag our MIDI track out by 2 bars here. Looks like it looped, so I'm just going to consolidate this real quick, and then drag our C1 note out all the way. And now I'm going to right click on the cutoff, hit show automation, and then I'm going to create this kind of shape. Perfect. Now we can record this and export it. Alright, so there's our sample. I'm just going to create a little bit of a fade, kind of like this. Then I'm going to right click on it and consolidate our audio sample. Then I'm going to turn up the volume by quite a bit. Now we can go ahead and export this. When I export it, I'm just going to go ahead and rename it C1, since that's the MIDI note that we recorded it at. And then I'm just going to give it a quick name. Alright, so now I'm going to insert a MIDI track and insert our Faceplant. Inside of our Faceplant, I'm going to click on the generator section and click on WaveTable. And so now we can import our wavetable. So go ahead and find your sample and then drag and drop it inside of the wavetable. Alright, so everything looks good. You can just hit done. And so I'm looking at the wavetable and it spikes in volume by quite a lot, around like the first frame up to like 24 frames. So what we're going to do to fix that is we're going to click on this little square box thing to edit the wavetable. Highlight the whole wavetable, go to fixes and click on normalize global peaks. That'll fix the spike in volume. And so what that does is it just normalizes the amplitude of the waveform. If we were to hit normalize RMS, that would have made the whole wavetable at a constant volume, and that's not what I want since this is a Pluck. Alright, sweet. So now that we have our wavetable set up, I'm going to go ahead and add our effects group. So I'm going to rename that FX. I'm going to add a limiter inside of lane 3. Inside of our effects group, I'm going to add a shaper and then a snap heap. Then I'm going to come down here inside of our modulator and add a LFO, add a new group as well, rename it for wavetable, and drag and drop this LFO inside of that group. This is just to help me keep organized with stuff. Then I'm going to create another new group, rename this FX off/on, and put a remap in here. For our LFO wavetable, I'm going to create this kind of shape, make a little bit of a slope. Then I'm going to turn the modulation off. And then I'm going to come to the trigger input, right click that. For note trigger, hit always trigger from note on, so the MIDI is always triggering this LFO. Then I'm going to open up this remap and make a square wave. So I'm going to turn on the snapping. Perfect. Now I'm going to come up here to our macro knobs. I'm going to rename macro 1 rate. And then I'm going to rename macro 2 FX off/on. Nice, I just wanted to set things up real quick. Okay, so for our FX group, I'm going to use one of the presets. So I'm going to click on the default, go to the simple folder, and hit concave. I'm going to right click on the mix and set it to 20%. And then I'm going to right click on the drive and hit 3. And then for our snap heap, I'm going to go ahead and open that up. We're going to do parallel processing. I'm going to add a dual delay. I'm going to set the time to synchronize and have it set to 1/16. Then I'm going to right click on the second delay and hit 1.52. I'm going to turn the mix up to 100%, and then I'm just going to turn the spread up a little bit, so around like 70%. Now I'm going to add a convolver, make sure the mix is at 100%, and then I'm going to use the first impulse response, which is the First Baptist Nashville impulse response. Then I'm going to turn the tone up by a little bit, so around like 50%. And now I'm going to add a high pass filter, right click on the Q, set it to 1, and then right click the cutoff and set it to 1000. Then I'm going to add another filter, right click the Q, set it to 1, and then make sure it's a low pass. right click the cutoff, set it to 3500 kilohertz. And that is pretty much all we're going to do inside of the snap heap, so we can go ahead and exit out of this. Now I'm going to right click the mix of the snap heap and hit 0. Now I'm going to modulate the mix of our snap heap group with this remap down here. So I'm going to hit the plus and modulate the mix by 100%. Then I'm going to come over here to our second macro where it says FX off/on. So I'm going to click on the plus and hit the equal on the remap. And so now the mix of the snap heap will act as a off and on switch because of the remap. Also forgot to mention, for the MIDI, you can go ahead and drag and drop your favorite MIDI loop. I just used a cymatics MIDI loop just because it saved me a bit more time instead of trying to draw out a melody. And so I'm just going to use the MIDI track that I was using before just to hear our preset being played back. Now we're going to modulate the frames of our wavetable and the rate. So before we start modulating the frames, I'm going to come up here to the rate macro knob, right click, and for the macro polarity, I'm going to click on minus. And now we're going to do the same thing for our LFO. So for the macro polarity, I'm going to set it to negative. And so now we can start modulating the frames of our wavetable. So I'm going to hit the plus on our LFO and then modulate the frames by 256. And so it should sound like this. I'm just going to mess with the slope a little bit more. Oh, that's perfect. Then I'm going to come over here to our rate macro knob, click on the plus, and then come over here to the rate. So I'm going to right click on the plus of our rate and hit -22. And so now we can slow down the modulation of our LFO. And then if we turn on our effects, that's pretty loud, so I'm going to come back over here to our snap heap, right click on the gain of our first parallel bus, and set it to -10. Perfect, so now we can exit out of this, and now the effects isn't so loud. Unless you prefer it that way, then just ignore that step. Alright, sweet. So that's pretty much the preset. The last thing I'm going to do is right click on the in gain of our limiter and hit 3. So we add 3 decibels of gain. And that is how you create a EDM pluck inside of Faceplant. I hope you guys enjoyed. I will see you in the next one. Adios.